Many landscape company owners dream of passing their business on to their kids or selling it. And today I'm excited to do an interview with the founder of Alpine Gardens, my Ramblin' Jackson client, and also the same company that designed and installed this landscape where we recorded today's podcast. And he talks with his son, Nate Fetig, who is the new owner of the company, and also their sales manager, Kris. And they brought a bunch of interesting props, including phone books and design tools that they used in the 70s and 80s. We look at a landscape design from 1980. So join me in today's video podcast as we talk about how communication has changed over the years, what they were doing before, and also what hasn't changed that's core to their success. So make sure you watch this video. If you're listening to this one on audio, check out the video podcast because we have lots of cool video and photo to share with you.
Our industry has gotten so much more sophisticated. The tools available to us are unbelievable compared to what he had available when he started. The technology aspect has changed customer expectations.
It's a major investment for most of our customers, and look at it like we were buying the product.
Communication is completely different. It's allowed us to do some incredible work that we never would have been able to do without some of the advancements.
They know that they're going to get a good product from us, where they might or might not from a smaller, maybe less expensive company.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Landscaper's Guide. Today we're actually under the pergola at my personal residence at a landscape installation that my client Alpine Gardens did for me. They did an incredible job. So I brought them here to talk about communication through the ages. We've got Jack Fetig, who founded the company in 1978, Nate Fetig, who is now the new owner with his wife Heidi, and Kris Nylander, who's the sales manager. So I just thought it was interesting, having worked with you guys for a while, hearing stories of the name of the company and like advertising you used to do. And we designed your website, Alpine Gardens, to have online scheduling for phone calls. And I remember this all kind of started, Nate, you and I were having a chat one time, and that Jack would come to you and say, so how are the phones? And you're like, well, actually, Dad, we designed the website so the phone doesn't ring. We get appointments on our calendar. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the barometer of how business was, it was the phone ringing. And it was definitely adjustment there for Dad the last couple of years that he was active. The phones weren't ringing, and we were happy about it, but he was panicked.
Yeah. How was that for you, Jack?
Well, a lot of it, as cell phones came in, we found that a lot of past customers, which seems to be where you get a lot of your work, ended up calling the cell phones instead of the main lines. And so you couldn't always measure it by the phones anymore, because they were ringing in someone's pocket and not at the main line. Only the new customers were calling on the main lines.
Well, Jack, maybe could you tell us like the brief history of Alpine Gardens? Like, how did you start the company? What inspired you to do it?
Well, at that time there really weren't a lot of landscape contractors, and I worked my way through college by working for a nursery, and landscaping was really done after the nursery work was done in the spring. Then we would go landscape people's houses. So it was kind of something that they did as a second business. And people kept asking me to come do work for them because the company I worked for just couldn't handle them. And so I had kind of had that in my mind, and I thought that we could do more work than just planting plants. And so in August of 1978, we started the business. We really weren't prepared. We really didn't understand business at all, but we understood we wanted to keep people happy, and we knew how to work hard.
I love it. So tell me about the name of the company. How did you pick Alpine Gardens?
Well, we really didn't have a name when we started, and as
I've got a phone book right here for you.
Oh, there we go. So the phone book was really an important way to get business at that point. In fact, it was one of the only ways besides meeting people to get new business. And so you wanted to be one of the first people under the listings in the yellow pages. And so we would, I was trying to come up with something that started with A, and I didn't want it to be AAA landscape. And so I came up with Alpine Gardens. And so that's where the name originally came from.
Yeah, Nate told me that, and you're essentially trying to rank in the phone book. Like, so we've done a lot to rank on Google and show up when people Google landscape design or landscape companies or whatever. But that's awesome that's how the name originally started. What year is this phone book from?
This was delivered to my house last week.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know they still made phone books.
I didn't,
but,
yeah, this is...
apparently someone in Fort Collins still is, and we are right in there in the A's, still right at the beginning.
So I'm looking for landscaping. Let's see if I can spell today.
The sections are pretty short.
Yeah, they're very short.
Well, that one is only a business listing.
Okay, landscape contractors, landscape architects. We're gonna have to vet these people. Are they actual architects?
Right.
Is Site One Landscape Supply an architect?
No, they are not.
I don't think so. But that's interesting. So they have landfills, land development, land companies, and then landscape contractors. And yeah, you're number 2 after A&M. So was A&M in business when you started? Who was that?
You know, you have to remember we started in Greeley, Colorado, and so A&M was a company that was over in Fort Collins, and yes, they were around.
Do you know how much it costs to be in here?
That is free at this point. If you want to create a larger ad, then it's pretty substantial. I think we paid our last phone book advertisement
2 years ago, I think.
Whatever, I think it was the year before we signed our agreement with Ramblin' Jackson.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
maybe, yeah.
I think it's been, since COVID.
Does anyone call and say, "Hi, I found you in the Fort Collins phone book"?
I can't say
Names
that
and
anyone
numbers.
has ever said that in the last 15 years.
But I would tell you that I'm still friends with our ad salesman from the phone book from
Dex.
Oh yeah, from Dex, and that was a big deal job, and I think back in those days we were spending $4,000 a month.
Wow.
On
When?
ads.
In what days?
Oh, that would be in the late 80s.
In the late 80s, you guys were spending like 50 grand a year
Yeah.
ish on the phone book. Would you pay for anything else, or was that enough?
Well, that was we would
Every
do.
phone book, and then
Yeah, you were in all Fort Collins, Greeley, Loveland phone book, because of course they were all different. And then we would also do shows. We did gardening shows. Those were pretty productive, but they were exhausting. There was a Greeley show that you had to be invited to, and it got you face to face. There were a lot of customers that, even though they were old customers, they would want to come by because that's all there was to do in March. And there was flowers, and it was a big deal to do that show, but we had to, the salesman built the show mostly, and then you had to stand there through the whole show on your feet on the concrete and talk to everyone. And but it was how we got business.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so when did it start to shift? Like, where does the rest of the business come from now?
I mean, we've got a lot of long-standing relationships, obviously, so there's a lot of referral business, but I would say 70% of our advertising budget is spent online, Kris. And so, over the course of the business, we've focused on relationship building, and then online is how we reach people.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So I was curious, like, how else have things changed over the years? And so I asked you guys to bring some props. So thanks for bringing a phone book. I was hoping to have an enormous one.
I know.
From like back in the day.
Yeah, they're all just propping up where the leg broke off my couch.
Oh yeah, so they're in use right now.
Yeah,
Good.
I couldn't free up any of those.
Well, yeah, that's important. So what else? What's next? What did you bring today?
Well, I guess would start with his contact app.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So, it started out, you just carried a calendar with you because you didn't have a phone to keep track of things. And so you carried a calendar with you, and then we had this to keep, this is how you remembered someone's phone number, was they got a little card.
So would you drive that around with you, or would that stay back?
No, that was on my desk. Eventually, probably by the late 80s, we got the, what were they called?
That was late 90s.
The big
late 90s.
Oh.
You had a Palm Pilot.
No, before that we had the paper one.
Day planners.
Day planners.
Yeah.
A day planner was a big deal. And so all these contacts would be in your day planner.
Yeah.
And but you didn't have a cell phone, so you couldn't call anyone anyway, and they couldn't call you. And when we first started, we rented a farmhouse thinking that was going to be a great deal, but it had a party line. And so you couldn't have a recorder. And when the phone would ring, you'd have to wait until you heard the pattern, so you knew if it was your phone or the neighbor's phone who was ringing. And then while you were talking to your customer, if they wanted to use the phone, they were clicking on the phone up and down. And so that part of communication was really different. But I would carry a bunch of change with me in my truck. And then during the day, I would go to like 7-Eleven, sit out in their parking lot on the payphone, and be calling my customers or my vendors.
Or the office.
Or
So
the
would
office.
you like call the office and be like, "Hey, who called so
who
far?"
called.
And then that's awesome.
Yeah, and we had a good friend, and they had a baby, and they needed, so it kind of worked out where I was able to pay her a low salary, and she just answered our phone and took care of her baby at our house. And but answered our phone for us, and then her husband actually worked for us, but that was how we answered the phone and my wife was still working, and she worked for a title company, which actually worked out really well because every time there was a new project in town, she would know about it because she was helping them with their title insurance, and so she would make sure I talked to them, and that helped us build that part of our business. And then once we had our first son, then she stayed home, and she took over the answering the phone and doing the books. Up till then, I had been doing the books on the 12-column accounting paper, and all the receipts were just thrown in a box till winter, and then I'd deal with it then.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That must have been one hell of a winter project.
It was. I mean, you couldn't do near the amount of work we do now. The efficiency of trying to deal with someone, draw a physical plan, physically meet with them. When I'd go to meet with them, I would have to carry, I looked like I was going to college. I would have big piles of books, and they were all marked as to where their plants were. And we'd spend the whole evening flipping through, looking at pictures of plants and going through the plan. And then if they wanted to change anything, if it was ink, then it was a big deal. A lot of times I'd have to redo the whole thing, go through the whole mess all over again.
Wow.
So the efficiency of sales was really different.
How long would it take you from the time that somebody found you in the phone book, they called, maybe left a message with somebody, you called them back, to you meeting with them, to like getting a design to them? Like, how long would that take back when you started?
Depending on how much we needed the work.
Yeah.
If we needed the work right away, it was done in a couple days. If we were stretched out, I could take a little more time. But I found through the years that once people talk to me, they want to be responded to within 2 weeks with something. They want to know how we're doing and see some progress.
Yeah.
It just seems to be that where
that makes sense.
How long people would wait.
So what other props did you bring today? We've got.
Well, I've got some plans from 1980 that can kind of show you the design process and why it was a big deal if somebody wanted to make a change.
Mr. and Mrs. Royal Henry. Yeah, if you could pass me another one. And I'm going to grab a rock.
Along with this prop, we kind of have some tools of how these designs were created. So, well, Dad, I guess tell us a little about what I'm looking at here.
So this is a Leroy lettering set, and it was my dad's. My dad was a civil engineer, and so you would take these and you would put them on your T-square, and then you would set up this pen and you would pick which letter you wanted to recreate, and this pen would follow that and create it on your design so that you could get perfect lettering. I didn't use it. I did it for original logos that we permitted.
You've got little mountains here in the
Yeah,
the
I did
A's.
those by hand, but
Nice.
but this was all originally, like when I did our business cards, that's how I did the lettering, but it was pretty cumbersome. But that's how people used to do the lettering, because you had people who were just draftsmen, and that's all they did.
Well, looks like you used, you got high tech here and used some
Yeah,
stamps
so
for
it
the
was a
plant
big-
symbols.
You know, I did not, my degree was not in landscape design. And so, and at
In
the
fact,
time,
there's that stamp right there.
there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just add an
Well,
ink
this might
pad
be
and a rubber
different.
stamp.
This says silver maple.
Yeah, but the symbol is the same there.
Oh, it's a symbol. I
Yeah.
got it. So, wow. Yeah, so if people wanted to change this, would they
I'd have to redraft. It
like
depends.
so how, like how
if-
many how many revisions would you do for somebody versus just
Again, usually, you know, if they were changing, they were going to buy. But, you know, when you met with someone, you had kind of figured out your schedule, and a lot of redrafting wasn't necessarily in your schedule. And so if it was just some changes where you're changing some varieties, you could see I did it by pencil when we got to this far.
right?
But if it was a total redoing a concept, then it could take a week or two. And then you had
Yeah.
to go through and meet with them again, redo the bids, the whole thing. And at that time, doing takeoffs was interesting in that, you know, when you start doing irregular shaped beds, this was a digitizer. And so it's set up so that you would run this around these irregular shaped beds, and then you had a chart here that, depending on what scale you were using, you could use a multiplier, and you could tell by the number that you got, and it would tell you how many square feet were in there.
So it's called a planimeter, and yeah, it was a mechanical takeoff
Yeah, and
tool.
it did all the calculus for you.
So when did you start to switch to like digital tools for landscape design?
No, I was trying to remember. I can still remember my wife's brother was a distributor for computers, some early computers, and he's, you know, you really need to think about a computer, and we looked, and it was a big deal for us. It was big expense. It was almost as much as a truck, and really what it did was it was a word processor, and it had a primitive spreadsheet, and that's it. That's all it did, and it could store some things, and so that was. But we got some, and it worked out really well. But one of the unknown things that happened with that was that once we started to use that, we really didn't need. We had extra secretaries, because at a certain point, if you had a fancy job, I don't know if we have any with the sticky back on.
No, I didn't bring any with the sticky back.
We would do these where we would ink them, and we would all the notes and the plant lists would be typed on sticky back paper that would stick on this, and then you could copy it. And there was also the proposals were all typed by a secretary on with carbon paper. And so one of the unknown results of getting a computer is now I'm typing my own proposals.
Oh,
And so That was a little ugly at first. But luckily, I had taken a typing class, so I could kind of type. That was just one of the things that people probably didn't think of. That when we went to a computer, you started moving everything to the designer. It's even now to where the designer's doing a lot of the accounting jobs now. That used to be that you'd have someone like an accounts receivable or accounts payable person.
As you started using computers and things, the landscape designer started taking on more responsibilities. Tell me more about that.
So a lot of the new software that we have now makes the landscape designer is doing the billing. They're creating the bills. The bill goes directly into your accounting software. And so they're really responsible for a lot of the things that keep a company profitable. And unfortunately, a lot of designers never really cared a darn thing about accounting. And so they're ending up being really creating what we need as a business and having to do something that most of them really don't even understand.
Well, how does that, what are some of the challenges with that? Maybe I don't know. What's it like?
I don't know, Kris, what's it like?
Kris, what's it like? Being the guy that, I'm curious about your background and all the things you're doing now that maybe you didn't think you were going to do.
A lot of the processes are pretty similar. It's just we're using different systems. We were doing it when I started. We did have computers. We had a spreadsheet software, but it was Lotus. It was not Excel. We had transitioned to Excel a couple years later. But we weren't doing as much by hand, but we were doing a lot of manual input. And so it was a lot of repetitive tasks, like writing their name and address and phone number multiple times on the plan, on material order lists, on the invoice, on everything. And everything was mailed. So you knew their address and phone number by heart, right? And now everything is done for you. You enter it once, and that's where, we've talked a lot about some of the automation stuff, and you can make some mistakes by trusting some of it, in that if there's a mistake early on, it can last a long time before you catch it. Whereas when you were doing it yourself, you'd catch it a lot sooner. But we were just starting out doing AutoCAD, where we were designing everything on the computer and doing all the estimating on the computer and all of that. I'm familiar with all of this because I did it in school, so we learned that way. But then I was really starting right when we were transitioning to a lot of the computer apps and software.
And did you start out at Alpine Gardens, or where did you?
Yeah, so 25 years now, so 1999. Yeah,
cool.
Right out of school.
Yep. That's amazing.
Yep.
Well, I was curious, Nate, what do you do now that, I just want to hear from the Fetigs for a minute. What is Alpine Gardens now that it was back in the day when you started it, and what are also then some of the biggest changes? Obviously, technology has changed everything.
Yeah.
But what's the same?
Well, we're still digging holes and putting plants in them. A lot of the construction techniques at their basis are the same. We've mechanized quite a bit. The equipment we use has changed a lot over the years, but the ultimate principles of what we do has remained the same. But beyond that, I'd say there's been so much change. Our industry has gotten so much more sophisticated. The tools available to us are unbelievable compared to what he had available when he started. And then the technology aspect has changed customer expectations. It's changed how rapidly the process happens. Communication is completely different, and it's not good or bad necessarily. I think some of the positive things is it's allowed us to do some incredible work that we never would have been able to do without some of the advancements.
Yeah. But I would say one of the things that we had to really stay with is that we really had to respect the customer and really think about that it's a major investment for most of our customers, and look at it like we were buying the product, and that empower all the employees that, would you buy this? And if not, let's figure out how to fix it, because I think that's really what's helped us, so that the customer really they know that they're going to get a good product from us, where they might or might not from a smaller, maybe less expensive company.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of, we're fortunate. We have a lot of longtime employees like Kris, and some that have even been with us longer. I think our longest tenured employee right now is 38 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of them, I think, like just the, you know, the family atmosphere, but they understand that, like Dad was saying, that our principle is, yes, we want to make money as a company, but ultimately, like, we want to satisfy the customer and fulfill their needs, and so you will never get in trouble as an employee with us if something doesn't feel right and you make an action on that. You know, we want people to feel like, hey, would I be okay with this if it was my money? And I think, you know, beyond all the technology, all the changes, that's one of the core principles, is you have to have sound business practices.
Are there some stories or experiences? Because maybe you could tell us a little bit. You worked in the business as a kid.
Yeah.
So tell us. I want to hear that. I want to hear more. I want to hear more about
his
that.
version or mine?
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, I think it was probably to get me out of the house, right? Like, just go to work. But I know I wasn't earning my money's worth when I was first starting out. It probably cost them more. They had to go fix everything I touched. But no, I think it taught a lot of foundational principles on how to work. Growing up and working in the summers in the family business and doing hard work. And, you know, it's tough in a family business trying to, I'm sure for him, you know, trying to treat me like any other employee and ensuring there's no favoritism or anything like that. And then from my perspective, trying to earn the respect of the people you're working with, because there's certainly a connotation that comes with that. But ultimately, I think it's paid off. You know, here I am, owner of the company, and, you know, we have employees that started with us when I was 1 year old. And now I'm their boss, and I think it has helped, having seen me come up through the company, and so they understand that I wasn't handed anything. I learned how to work. I have that work ethic, and that probably benefited me as I worked through the career path.
Yeah, I think that's worth talking about on the podcast, because a lot of people listening are family businesses and they may pass their business on to their kids. And I liked hearing the story of you. What are some of the positions specifically that you've had starting at like age 8? So
we own a garden center and nursery as well. So when I was younger, I worked on the potting crew. I watered plants a lot. I'd pull weeds, and then worked my way up through different positions, through labor positions. When I kind of came back and was working through my horticulture degree in college, I was working as our commercial estimator. I oversaw our fleet and equipment repair, that side of the division, and eventually worked up to general manager and then owner.
When he was going to school and had told me that he really wanted to take over the company, I actually tried to change what jobs he was doing so he was exposed to things that I didn't think he had been exposed to properly before, and equipment and the commercial side. And I felt like that would really help him as he started to run the company. And he did a great job with it.
What are some of the things, maybe, Jack, that have been hard for you now that you're not the owner, right? You've transitioned, as far as I understand.
Yeah.
What's been the hardest part?
It's really, I mean, we were ready to retire, and they've done a good job of taking over things and trying to find the time when it was time for me to, they didn't want to tell me they didn't need me anymore, but I was starting to occupy meetings that I shouldn't have. I was making things take too long and that type of thing, and they didn't want to say anything, but I wanted to make sure that the person I was training knew enough to do the job, and for the few jobs that I maintained. So probably for me, it's really, it's probably been more trouble for them than for me, because they probably were ready sooner than I was. But you know, between right when all this was going to happen, it took a little longer because COVID came, then their first son came, and so it seemed like they might need more help for a little while longer, and so that part ended up making it interesting. Good interesting, but it was interesting.
Cool. Well, appreciate you guys bringing all these designs and instruments and Rolodexes. The one last thing we didn't see was the camera. I've got to know what kind of camera is it?
Well, this is an old 35 millimeter camera. Let's see if I can get it out.
Go the other way.
It's buttoned in. The case is attached to it.
It's probably been on there for 30 years.
Cool. Pentax.
So, you know, from a marketing perspective, we always wanted to take pictures of our jobs, and so we would take slides mostly.
Yeah, we probably have 10,000 slides.
And so, yeah, and there was one camera. And now every foreman has a smartphone in their pocket that takes a better picture than that.
Plus, we carried a, what's the instant camera? The
Polaroid.
Polaroid. But back then, a Polaroid picture was about $1 a picture.
Wow.
And so when we would go to a job site, you were kind of scotch on the pictures, where now it has saved, at the end, it saved me so much time using the pictures, because I could look at it and say, oh, it drops here, or where before I'd have to drive back out there and look at whatever it was I was trying to figure out.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming on the Landscaper's Guide and sharing your story. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you,
Thanks
Jack.
for having us.
Thanks so much for watching the Landscaper's Guide podcast. If you enjoyed this, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel to get weekly sales, leadership, and marketing inspiration to grow your landscape business. And next, I'll see you in the next video. This is cool. It looks awesome through here. I'd love to take pictures with this. This is a great lens. I'm excited to do an interview with the founder of Alpine Gardens. Some mosquitoes.